Okay, I'm going to assume that even with dark screens, people are there. So good evening again. Really, it's always a pleasure to be here. The topic tonight is about um, the ways that consciousness come into being from a Buddhist perspective, which, I always say that, but it's just a question of direct experience. The teachings of the historical Buddha were merely pointing to universal experiences that we all have and that we can discover. So it's not philosophy or belief or speculation. So from a Buddhist perspective, there are five senses, the five senses that we normally know: hearing, seeing, smell, taste, and touch. A sixth sense, which is the mind, which includes emotions, urges, host of things, mind states. But whatever arises in the mind manifests itself, like an emotion, for example, actually manifests itself in the body and is experienced through one or more of the five senses. So the focus of this talk is about sensory awareness, which in this practice is referring to the five senses in the body. And the way consciousness arises is through a contact with one of those senses with an object. So this is a lemon from one of the trees in my house. And in this hand, once, I obviously have it in this hand, but when the lemon touches the fingers, a signal is sent from here. It's pretty extraordinary. That goes in the arm, into the spinal cord, up into the base of the skull and into the brain, and touch consciousness arises. When Maria is holding the bell on a striker, you can't hear the bell. She hits the bell, the vibration moves through the air, and if you have a functioning eardrum, goes in, touches that same thing, it goes into the brain, and there is hearing consciousness. So with each of the five senses, the senses are waiting to be activated for there to be some kind of contact. If there's no contact, if there's no odor, there's no smell. If there's no temperature, there's no touch consciousness of temperature. So it's really this extraordinary thing where the senses are sitting there just waiting to be activated, waiting for this contact with the world. And when that happens, this is how we relate to, enter into connection with, and understand the world, is through our senses. Each of the senses has different qualities and characteristics. And this is the thing that's really kind of so wondrous about them, because they are each a different dimension or a different pathway of experience with their own qualities and characteristics. So, our life can be, if we're using our senses at kind of a rudimentary level, from a sensory level, life can be kind of in black and white. And if we really develop our sensory capacity, which we can do, we can expand it and deepen it. It's more like it's life in color rather than black and white. So there's a real possibility when we do this to increase the quality of our life, and the more information that comes in through our senses, the greater possibility of our life being vivid and having insight. So how do we do this? The last time, I think the last time I was here, maybe the time before, I talked about discernment, and the Buddha talked about there was a knapsack with two different openings in it, and take things out, set them down, and look at them, and look at the relationship between them. That's discernment. Here we're talking about sensory discernment. So back to the lemon. I can look at the lemon and I can examine it. I can all different kinds of angles. I can touch it and I can feel all the crevices. I can feel the temperature. There's certain parts are soft, certain parts are hard. There's a width to it. There's a length to it. If I combine the looking and the touching, that's another experience. If I close my eyes, it's a fascinating experience because I think I have this visual idea of what this is. When you close your eyes, suddenly you can really feel all of the dimensions. So that's one of the qualities of touch, is that depending on whether you're combining it with another sense, the depth and sensitivity of it, the nuance, the subtlety changes. You can smell it. It actually smells different at different locations. I've already heard it, but you can do. So those sound different, you know, when I use my fingernail, when I use the palm of my hand, that sounds a lot different. I'm not going to bite into it. Probably everybody will start puckering, but even tasting it with your tongue, there's some taste to it. Interestingly, it's not the taste as if I bit into it. Okay. So that would be sensory discernment, taking apart. Now, why would we want to do this? The objective when we say we want to see things clearly as they are, the Buddha is really talking about a stripped down experience. Like we actually want to see the thing itself. The thing itself here is everything I just described. Now, the minute that I go, oh, you know, that's the lemon off of my tree, I'm no longer directly experiencing the lemon. I'm experiencing a thought. Where if I go, oh, you know, that bloomed late this year I'm no longer in direct experience. So any thought that I have about this intervenes and cuts off the sensation. Now my mind may go back to it, but there's a difference, a huge difference between the sensory experience, which is quite, as I was kind of emphasizing during our sitting, when you're just working with your eyes closed, quite quickly, 15, 20 seconds, you start to feel connected in relationship. Your nervous system starts to settle. Thoughts just start to move into the background, and a sense of satisfaction of moment to moment awareness, the wholeness that the moment is enough sets in. And then the thought comes in and breaks that. So one of the ways that this is traditionally described is you take this and put it in front of a mirror, and the mirror perfectly reflects back the image of the lemon. So that is what fundamental sensory awareness is. Nothing is added to it. So why is that important? Well, if I could actually do this, you know, if I could develop the ability through sitting meditation and other techniques to feel a sensation in my body and be very clear that it's a sensation, and then to experience its different qualities and different characteristics, I have the ability to recognize the difference between that and what I add on to it, what the sixth sense adds on to it. Expectations, assumptions, projections, beliefs, narratives, those are all different than the experience that's taking place in my body. Desire, aversion, in all of its many forms. So if I can make that discernment, if I can discern between the thing itself, this, the sensation in the body, a thought, and an emotion, I then suddenly have the ability to understand at a visceral way, in direct experience, how and why I suffer. Because I have now the ability to discern the difference between those, and I can see how when my mind moves in a certain way into a reactive pattern, when it attaches to something, when it identifies with it, I immediately start to suffer and struggle. So the whole idea of seeing clearly is to see the thing itself, whether the thing itself is this or the thing itself is a thought, a narrative about our past, an emotion, and be able to distinguish that, discern that from the other elements of experience. When we do that, it depersonalizes it, and then we can suddenly see the reactive pattern. And what does that give us? It gives us the possibility of choice. If we are caught in the desire, in the assumption, the projection, the belief, the narrative, the attachment, the personalization, we can't see the thing clearly. We can't get back to the thing itself. And it's very, very difficult to relate to the reactivity other than in a conceptual, emotional way, which is really hard to break through. So is this working so far? Yeah. Okay, good. When I get blank faces, it always makes me nervous. Okay, so the thing that I think is so beautiful about this, and this is really about all of the teachings, is the elegance of it in terms of how simple it is in its directness. Like if you can see the thing itself and distinguish it from the other experiences, suddenly you have the possibility of seeing what causes us to suffer, be happy, and make a choice about it. Yeah. Now, what's the problem? I mean, why don't we just always see the thing itself? Well, if you just think about most of us, the way that we're living most of the time, we're dominated by the sixth sense. We're completely out of balance. The thinking mind is commenting on, judging, making evaluations, making a story most of the time, so that the relationship between the five senses and the sixth sense is completely distorted. And this is the reason, many people it's attributed to, but they say, thinking is a good servant, but a poor master. So one way to think of practice is an effort to bring a balance into our minds and our hearts and our living between the senses. So this domination, which is the central cause of our suffering, starts to have some kind of balance. And the sensory direct awareness in and of itself is calming and healing, and it's actually joy-making. It's really something. So I want to use a couple of illustrations of this to make a point. Let's see, we've got plenty of time. Okay, so there's a little movie out right now. It's a real sleeper. And I very seldom will go and look at what the critics have to say, like Rotten Tomatoes and all of that. But I did on this one because I liked it so much, and it has no special effects. It doesn't have any kind of like big, serious emotional drama in it. And it's really satisfying. And much to my surprise, it's gotten great ratings. So the movie, I'm not going to ruin the whole thing if you decide to watch it. It's on Netflix. Is about a young Korean man. I guess in the movie he's in his early 30s, and his father is a very, very well-known architectural professor who teaches in Columbus, Ohio at the university there. And for those of you who don't know, if you're interested in architecture at all, which I am, Columbus, Ohio is, of all places, is like a mecca. There are all of these buildings who have been designed and built on the designs of world famous architects there. So, but he's kind of estranged from his father, and because his father loves architecture, he doesn't. And so he meets a young girl at the university, and she's in love with architecture. And that's her world. And they meet because the day his father had a stroke, she was going to go to the lecture. And so then he came to take care of his dad. So they kind of developed this platonic relationship, and you kind of wonder whether it's going to become more than platonic. It's very soft and kind and interesting. And so they're out walking around, and they come up to this bank building. And I'm getting to the point finally. So they come to this bank building, and I'm going to give you kind of the general dialogue here. And his name is Jin, J-I-N. So when they first meet early in the movie, he says Jin, and she says, her name is Casey. She says, Jin? And he says, no, Jin with an N. So then through the rest of the movie, she'll see him on the other side of the street, and she'll yell, "Hey, Jin with an N." Yeah. So they're in front of this building, and here's the dialogue. She says, "This is my second favorite building. This building is by Inero Saracen, and it sort of resembles a house. And he is the Gateway Arches in St. Louis. He designed those, and I think in the late 60s, 70s, there was a tulip chair that was like the big rage. Everybody wanted this in businesses. Well, he designed that. And so Jen says, well, what do you know about the building? And she says, well, this is one of the first modernist banks in America. You can imagine at the time that this was built, that what it was like walking into an all glass bank. It was quite unusual, radically, really, because during that time, banks were designed to be imposing and fortress-like with tellers behind bars. Now, some of us can remember that. When you walk into a bank and they're just, okay. The idea here was that you could actually walk in at street level. You didn't have to climb any stairs. It's inviting. And so Jen says to Casey, what are you doing? And she goes, what? And he says, okay, stop the tour guide mode. You said this is one of your favorite buildings. And she says, it is. And he says, well, why? And she says, well, it's one of the first modernist buildings in the United States. And he says, no, come on. Is that the reason that you like this building so much? Is that you like it intellectually? And she says, no, I'm also moved by it. And then he says, okay, that's it. I want to know what moves you. So this is the difference, this little discussion between looking at this beautiful piece of architecture conceptually through ideas, and then actually talking about, well, what is the direct experience of being able to walk in at street level? What does that feel like, as opposed to walking into a fortress where you feel open, right? You feel welcomed rather than feeling like you're walking into a place. So the difference between your mind kind of being in a tour guide mode, commenting on everything all the time, and actually experiencing what's in front of you are two radically different experiences. Okay. There's also a quotation that I really like from Tibetan teacher, and he's a Tulku Thondup. And this is from his book, The Healing Power of the Mind. And he says, we are always imposing our habitual viewpoints onto things. For example, looking at a tree, a doctor may see it as a source of medicine or poison. A trader might calculate its monetary value, and a carpenter might measure its construction potential. A scientist might analyze its chemical and electrical impulses. An intoxicated person might see the same tree as a wheel spinning in his or her head. A poet might lose herself in its beauty. A Christian might utter a prayer in praise of God's creation. A Buddhist might see the tree as a manifestation of interdependent causation or an expression of ultimate peace. In any case, these are all ideas, not direct experiences. So this isn't saying any of those are bad. It's just saying knowing the difference between experiencing the thing itself, a tree, that has qualities and smells and textures and everything, and experiencing an idea about a tree. And in Buddhist practice, we don't get liberated by experiencing things through ideas. In sitting meditation and in real life, we are liberated through our direct receiving of the world and our experience of it, which bypasses all the thinking circuits and produces spontaneous insight or wisdom. Okay. So this seems to me to be kind of the most fundamental issue of not just Buddhist practice, but of living. Because we just did I put on a one-day retreat on Saturday, and the theme was this, and basically a day of exercises, mostly outside, watching the degree to which our minds are experiencing things through ideas as opposed to experiencing things directly, and then how to bring that balance up, how to set the conceptual aside and how to experience more directly. And by experiencing more directly, having experiences which are more alive, more awake, more vivid, multi-dimensional, more satisfying. So it's not just like a practice or a Buddhist issue. We're really talking about the quality of our lives. And I think if you ask 95% of the people, I think 100, but 95% of the people who were at the retreat, they would say that they had experiences where they were not just surprised, but in many cases shocked at how what they were doing was having a surface impression of something and then not going any further. And that you had to do something more, explore, investigate, to actually have the more in-depth, nuanced, subtle, rich experience. And this is the common experience. I mean, if you just think of your own life, like if you go to Seattle, the first time you drive in from Seattle to town, I mean, you see everything. I mean, you're seeing the names of the turnoffs and the shapes of the turnoffs and whether there's open fields or buildings. The 10th time, you get in the car and drive into town and hardly see any of that. So our mind habituates to things. You drive from wherever you are to the Mountain Stream Meditation Center. You mostly drive by everything, just have this surface appearance. And we're doing that all the time with our senses. We're very seldom taking the time to after we look at something, actually try to see it and to experience it in some greater depth. And so I would encourage you just to think about that, just to watch your own experience. How often do you just, take one of you have some Buddha or a print on the wall or a piece of art that, you bought and you put it in your house because it was going to enrich things and it has meaning to you. And now you walk into the room and notice it, and that's it. When was the last time that you actually just stopped, just for a moment, 5 or 10 seconds, really looked at it and savored it? Life is to be savored, to have an in-depth experience. When was the last time that you approached a piece of fruit or a vegetable like we did, tonight? I don't know. When was the last time you approached your own hand or any part of your body the way we did, with some real care and gentleness and lovingness? You do these things and you feel different. It opens you up, it expands you, it puts you in connection with a real life. This is a choice. It doesn't happen on its own. The mind likes familiarity. It likes to slot things in so that, I know what's happening. I know my environment. And once that happens, once it locks into that habituated place, it doesn't go beyond the surface. And so much of practice is about breaking that. But this even happens in practice. This is the reason people are falling asleep in meditation all the time, or getting into these comfortable gossamer states, is that the mind, we've lost the intention that when we sit down, the whole purpose of it is exploration. It's really an exciting prospect. And instead, we just sit down, lock into a routine. The mind says, I know this. And so there's very little discernment, deep experience, and it's hard to keep the mind awake. Okay, so I think that's where I'm going to stop, because by this time, I'm sure I probably have some questions and some objections. So I'll leave a little bit of time for discussion. Okay. Yeah, Philip.
So Dennis, I'm going to start with probably the most mundane question of the night. You can't tell us about the movie and not tell us the title.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did the same thing on Saturday. I can't believe it. It's called Columbus, like Columbus, Ohio.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. And honestly, it's worth watching, but don't turn it on wanting a bunch of action, because there's not any action like that. Tim, hi.
Hi, Dennis.
Let me try to turn this up a little bit.
Okay. As I was, listening to you talk and, kind of expanding my awareness as you were talking to my, the temperature of the air on my skin and my pressure on my body on the floor. And, is kind of what came up for me around that is just this sense of, it really makes life a bigger container. It kind of becomes more expansive. It seems like when I am caught up in my thoughts, my experience is much more narrow, and there's contraction there a lot of the times, particularly if there's something unpleasant. I become kind of identified with it and contracted. And I know that you work a lot with people that have chronic pain, and I was just, as you were talking about, I know, like, when I'm in pain, the pain is there, and then there's the thoughts that go along with that pain that tend to be sometimes more of the problem. but then there's also like, maybe if the pain's in my back, maybe there's other interesting things going on though with my feet and my legs and my hands. And I'm just wondering, like, when you work with people that are in pain like that, does kind of helping them to see the bigger picture of things that are going on besides what's happening in their back, is that part of what you do with those folks?
Yeah, I read a book by Alan Watts in 1968, and there's one paragraph in it which I still have and use when I work with pain. I get pain talks, and what it basically says is that if you can experience the sensations of pain directly, and to some degree set the thought about the pain aside, that it actually turns into something completely different, something that the mind is unfamiliar with. And the minute that happens, just think about like your own practice, like on retreat, and you have insight. The moment that you see it from a different angle, from an possibility opens up. So my experience, I worked at the UC Davis Pain Division for 11 years using these techniques for pain. And so I always try to actually get down first at the experiential level and give somebody the possibility of seeing that a different experience is available. And, there's all kinds of ways to do this, but, one that I'm sure you've heard of is that people will come in and they've got, a bad shoulder or a bad hip. And the problem is that most people who have chronic pain have a well-developed narrative about the pain, which is just like locking them in a box. So you sit down and ask them to close their eyes, and you tell them that we're going to actually investigate the pain, and they think you're out of your mind, right? It's like, no, I didn't come here I came here to get away from the pain. I said, well, okay, well, just what do you got to lose? Okay, I mean, like, let's do it. And you can always scream and run out of the room. You can open your eyes and leave. Okay. So then, okay, so let's go to your shoulder. And what does that feel like? Well, it really hurts. And okay, so how does your other shoulder feel? And they go, well, no, well, actually, that doesn't feel okay. Well, how about your right foot? Put your attention in the bottom in your ankle. And so you do this, and then suddenly the pain in the shoulder feels differently. So, I'm always, and there's a bunch of little experiences like this that you can create, but I'm looking for just this tip of an experience where somebody goes, wow, maybe there's something possible here. And if you can make that happen, then the kinds of stuff that we're talking about, different methods and theories, and then you can go there. But if you can't get this first experience, it's really hard, because then what people want to do is just go to their narrative and talk about the pain. So you've got to get to the core of this practice, which is the direct experience. And the other part about this is that it's very, very common. This is like 22 years for me of doing this, and people will frequently come in and want advice about meditation practice. They're not really there about pain, although they have pain. And I'll sit with them for quite a while, asking them questions. And I'm convinced that people's inability to experience their body is one of the major reasons that they have difficulty using all of these practice methods. Because if you can't really experience your body, if you're in a fight with your body, or you're afraid of your body, or you're just numb all the time as a defense mechanism, when you practice, where's your mind going to go? It's going to go in your head, right? So, I mean, I'll work with people for months and months and months on simple sensory exercises in their body to develop the ability to feel things. And if that takes hold frequently, it changes their whole practice. And putting in a pitch for what I'm talking about tonight, in my own practice and in working with people, learning how to feel more and more deeper sensory awareness and actually savor it has not just changed, but radically changed my understanding of all the teachings and the way I practice. There's some real potential here that, you know, nothing works for everybody. But if this is even a little bit interesting to you, it's worth exploring because it can really make a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Rose, good evening.
Yes, hello from Sacramento. I was one of the lucky people that got to do the Saturday workshop, and I must say, just a quick report. I was so surprised at how easy it was once I took your instructions and brought my attention into bodily sensing. And it was like oh, I'm 2 years old again. I'm 5 years old. It's like it's natural. And then to take what you're premise that we can touch consciousness and my internet is very unstable, by the way, so if I drop out, oh well. But I was surprised at how easy it was to get very deep very quickly and then go back to a sitting meditation, bringing the body consciousness kind of meditation, and realize how it was much easier to watch the thoughts, let them go. It just was very deep. And
Yeah.
very, very refreshing and healing, I found. And then I wanted to ask you to please tell the story of the two monks from the two different lineages.
Oh, okay, all right.
Is that, I love that story.
Yeah, that would have been good. So,
Thank you.
okay, so thank you. So, boy, that's like, you know, how thankful and grateful I am, you know, because, Rose says, well, I was there, you know, and then you wonder, what is she going to say? So thank you. So, okay. So, and, you know, I was saying that when you were actually in this, that you feel connected in relationship and become calm. I mean, it really is a healing feeling, and it is healing because you actually experientially get it, that when you can drop into that place, the moment is enough. You don't need anything more than that moment, you know. So the where I should have started, thank you, Rose, was, and you probably heard this story before, but there's the teaching story where there's two monks and they're walking down a river, and they're from different monasteries. So they start talking about, you know, the heads of the monastery, their teachers, you know, and so you probably heard that. I have no personal experience of this, but you probably heard that in the suttas it says that if you become fully awakened, that you suddenly have all these additional powers, you know, like Buddha could see his prior lives and supposedly transport himself and all this. So the one monk says, you know, I mean, like my master, gosh, unbelievable. You know, he can see his prior lives and he can read people's minds, and you know, he's just like lit up, you know. And then so he goes on for quite a while, and then he turns to the upper monk and he says, well, tell me about your master, you know, what's amazing about your master? And he says, well, when my master tastes, he tastes. You know, when my master hears, he hears. You know, it's like, it's not the shiny object, you know, it's like the way you get there is through being here. So yeah. All right, so it's 7:20. I think we probably, or at least my part, I better wrap up here. Hey, thank you very much for attending tonight, and your attentiveness. I really appreciate it. You know, it's always curious to me. I wonder if there's more suffering in the world than there were at earlier times. And I don't know. I think maybe it's just that we know more about it. I don't know. But in any event, there are so many people and so many children who are suffering in the world right now and who are looking for hope and looking for healing, that the ability for people like ourselves to be able to come together and explore like this, I mean, it's so precious. And may our good intentions and the merit of our effort tonight not only contribute to our satisfaction and our peace and those around us, but everybody who's suffering in the world at the moment. So thank you very much.